All right, what is going on, everyone? Welcome to Jake and Friends. Every Monday, 12 Eastern, you know what's going down, right? We already have a whole bunch of people. If you're coming over from Zoom, it was just getting too tricky to do. I was trying to do like a Zoom and a LinkedIn Live at the same time. It got a little crazy, right? And so I decided I'm going to simplify this, stay on the LinkedIn format. Seems to be working so far. So, we're going to keep with it. So, all right. So this week I've got a very special guest. I'm going to bring her live in a second. Her name's Megan Bowen. I'll let her introduce herself a little bit. We're going to talk about customer success, keeping customers happy. And I wanted you to think about a word today. To me, it's not about keeping customers happy. It's about keeping customers loyal. And I think too many people, I did a post on this yesterday, we've got this very service mindset that we've got to try to shift and think about. And so I want to try to focus today on the techniques and tactics you can use to keep customers loyal, right? What do you want? Do you want happy customers or loyal customers, right? And so we're going to talk a lot about that. We're going to talk about account-based marketing. Got just a ton of different shit in here. So this is great. So, all right, let's bring Megan live too. What's up? There she is.
Hey, Jake. How's it going?
It is going awesome. Congratulations again on the new role. I'm very excited for you.
Yeah, it's been awesome. 1 month in and it's going great.
Super jealous. I told Chris immediately. I was like, God, you fucking damn it. It's like, why didn't I try to like go after Megan? But no, it sounds like it's awesome. I love Chris. I've got a ton of respect for Chris and he's killing it. I really we just referred him actually into one of our clients. And so, I see a ton of value in what he's doing on the marketing side. And it's just such a nice kind of compliment to the modern thinking that, we do, I think, on the sales side and that side of the house. So for those of you who don't know Megan, right? Megan is a COO, head of success. You headed up product, right? Sales, right? Pretty much everything. Like you've basically been CEO. You've been the CEO. Let's just call it.
For that. Yeah, I've had a pretty wide range of experience. I started my career as an account manager at an ed tech company, though. I did that for 7 years. And so, the core of my experience really is in customer success and account management. After that, I went to ZocDoc and built out post-sales there, did the same at Grubhub Seamless for B2B. And then when I went to Managed by Q, my scope really increased. And I took on marketing, sales, success, operations, was COO there. It was awesome to really understand how important each of those functions are, how they all work together. And coming from a customer success lens, I felt like I was able to bring a unique perspective to kind of engage the entire company around what we're doing for the customer, which was important. And had a stint at Platters, and then most recently joining Chris at Refine Labs and helping sort of both COO and Chief Customer Officer, all things company operations, customer success. Getting my hands dirty, working with several customers myself and loving it.
I love it. Yeah. And it's interesting, people, again, this goes back to running an effective customer success org, and we're going to get into this. I think we've talked about this before. When I was the head of sales and success at Chartbeat, what we did about halfway into the role is we made the strategic decision to have account management still report to me into sales, but we actually decided to have CS report into product for this exact type of reason. Like CS dotted line to me, but people, most companies, I don't think that strategically, candidly. I think a lot of companies are just hold on. What did I say the other day? It's like, close the deal, hold on, try to live up to the promises of sales. And then like, just do your best, check in, touch base, everything that you need to get in.
And I think you bring up a good point, because I think there's confusion too around what is account management, what is customer success, what is customer support. They're actually 3 distinct functions, right?
That's right.
Account management, you own the business relationship, typically responsible for upsell, renewal, expansion. Customer success is about having the customer achieve their desired outcomes by using your product or service. Proactive customer support is reactive. That's answering emails, calls, chats. People talk about those 3 functions interchangeably, and they're very distinct and different. I have a lot of opinions on orgs that have account management and customer success together. There are some complex orgs that need those functions separated.
Yeah, for sure.
I believe if you do customer success correctly, that the renewals and the upsells and the expansion will follow. And putting too many people in front of your customer can sometimes muddy the waters. You have your enterprises though, where that structure can make sense. But anyway, just to clarify that, I think there often can be some confusion around what each of those teams represent.
I think, and I think you and I see it the same way. So, and then maybe I can we'll double check. So like account management, and again, you can kind of tell me how you view it. I view account management as the business relationship and growing at like a macro level, meaning not that you're not in like making sure people are using it, but account management is really understanding, are we pacing toward the business goals that we have? Are we, and not that customer success should also know all this, right? Customer success should also know all this, but I think of them as more of focused on that. Like, are we having the impact the product was supposed to have? Where customer success is making sure we following through on like the core like thing that somebody bought, right? Are we making sure that we're, hitting our goals around usage, continuing to align to business unit priorities? And like you said, support is reactive. Is that, so I'm close?
So, yeah, I think that's, I would agree that those are sort of the traditional definitions. I think the one point that I would challenge is, I think most organizations, I believe, should have a customer success function that is responsible for what you just described, AM and CS would own. I think often companies over segment this for customers.
Yeah, again, for sure.
The high sort of enterprise B2B, it makes sense. You typically need that because there's so many people on the customer side too. But I really want us to lean into customer success, because I think the business outcomes you're trying to achieve as an account manager will come if you do your job as a CSM correctly. And
that's exactly right. Yeah, that's exactly right. And I can see that too. I think I put up a post about this last week that I was reading a book talks about over segmentation, and that Adam Smith talked about this in Wealth of Nations. There's a couple other economists and professors that are talking about the issue with over specialization is you have a degradation of the work experience and then therefore the customer experience. And so I think what you're seeing when you say that, and what we're seeing is that this journey, there's like a breaking point. And so if these groups are all so detached with different KPIs, different metrics for success, then I think you're not going to fix that. I think you're going to continue to see that mindset that people are just, we're specializing because it's what we were told to do. It's what our VC told us to do. And so as opposed to what's actually best for the customer.
Yeah. Or people, I think, over segment because it's the best for the company.
Yeah, exactly.
We will feel better if we know that we can hold this person accountable to the renewal, right? And we'll have this other person deal with the product stuff and not seeing it from the customer point of view. I think that's the crux of a lot of these types of decisions as well.
Yeah, and I know we're going to get into a few different topics. You actually put up a post this morning about customer success philosophy. So let's sit and talk about customer success for a little bit and kind of how you see it being critical. Obviously, again, you grew up in that world and then moved to the product and operations and all these other. So do you want to, you don't have to necessarily go into all 8 of the kind of customer success philosophy. Shelby, if we can drop the link to that post, I think I just sent Shelby a quick note. We'll drop the link to the post. You can look at all 8. But are there things that, you feel are most mission critical? So if out of those, if you're someone who's watching this, you're a head of sales or CS or CEO, are there kind of 2 or 3 of these areas that you feel like, man, if you nail these, you're going to be in a good spot, from a CS standpoint?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think one of them is around managing expectations. And so I think the root of most customer discontent is because there was a mismatch of expectations, either in the sales process, in the handoff process, or just in the ongoing engagement. People make so many assumptions every day. And if you can nail that, it really can mitigate so much disappointment. So I think
how do you do that? So let's get tactical. So you think manage expectations, and let's just go through those 2 scenarios. You have sales jam this shit through and said like, oh, don't worry, our customer success team is world class. They're going to handle this for you for like the $4,000 implementation fee. So how have you seen success org successfully reset a deal that passed over this bad?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'm designing the right handoff process, and knowledge transfer from sales to success is important to mitigate that. But to your question, let's say expectations were poorly set. CSM inherits this account and now has to course correct the situation. And so my approach has always been, as soon as I uncover that this exists, have the tough conversation. And this is actually one of my other points of my philosophy. You have to have the tough conversations early and often. So I would admit, hey, I think I've realized that there's a misalignment of expectations. It seems that you believe X, Y, and Z when in fact A, B, and C is true. Like, am I reading that correctly? Are you also seeing that? It's really important to call that out. I try to do so in a way that it's not about blame, but it's about, okay, we're in this situation. So what are we going to do to get out of this situation, right? And, it typically is likely a compromise of, maybe going above and beyond or slightly out of scope to make it right to the customer, while also trying to figure out, where you can pull back and get closer to what the right expectation is. Often bringing in an executive or bringing in the salesperson, like sometimes another voice can help moderate that conversation if needed. And then I think the key is once you have that, like you have to nail your next steps, because now you've taken a step back in their eyes. They're not loving the fact that this happened. And so you need to create a really good next impression so that they're able to move past this and you guys are able to have a good relationship going forward.
I love that. Yeah. So this idea of managing expectations, but I think what you just said, if we can just like click into it a little bit, I think a lot of CS, maybe it's a persona. I feel like that conversation you just had, if I think of the typical SaaS CS org, I think that would be really hard. I think, it goes back to training, et cetera. So is there something, if somebody's in CS, is there, maybe look, you've ran teams, right? So maybe there's conversations you had. How do you actually work with your CS to feel comfortable with those conversations? To be like, those tough conversations and expectation is so critical. How do you actually work with the CS team to get them to be okay doing that, where they might be a little nervous?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I personally think customer success is the hardest job at the company. So when I am building teams, I think my top 3 qualities in a CSM is communication, empathy, and EQ. I think people that are really strong in those 3 areas are able to navigate these conversations really well. But absolutely, I have different frameworks that I use to break down these conversations into sort of teachable moments. There's a method I love called LARing: listen, acknowledge, align, ask, resolve. And if it's a framework that you can pretty much apply to any conversation where the customer is angry or disappointed or discontent. And if you follow the framework well enough, you will get to a resolution and the customer will be, if not happy, at least satisfied with a resolution.
Right.
And so I try to focus on bringing in the right people that are going to be set up for success to have those conversations. When I inherit a team or folks that maybe are not as skilled there, I have very specific training and frameworks that I provide. And then lastly, people learn this by watching. And so when I'm working with a CSM and there's a particular issue, I often say, let me have the conversation with you on the phone, right? Watch how I take this customer sort of through my methodology to address what's happening and ultimately align on next steps. And I think that leading by example or showing them, I think is a good learning moment. I think also it really you get a lot of credibility and respect from your team when you're like, all right, let me jump in the trenches with you and like have this difficult conversation. And like, I'm not going to ask you to do something that I wouldn't do myself.
That's right. Yeah. And I think that there's also similarities to that in sales too, where if you've got a leader who's willing to go in and have like the tough, negotiation or whatever conversation, I think it plays. So manage expectations. That was one. And I'm glad, I just wanted to double click into it because I know from working with a lot of CS orgs and account management orgs that that can be a tough one. So what else? So out of the 8 in here, and I saw Brian, thanks for dropping the link to the post in there. What were the other 2 that you would say are, if I only had these 3, what were the other 2 be?
Yeah. And I think you touched on this in your post yesterday, kind of promoting this live session, which is adding strategic value. And in order to do that, you need to actually understand your customer's business. You need to understand how they make money, which was your point. You need to understand the challenges that they're facing. You need to understand how their decision to work with you connects to the business outcomes they're trying to achieve. Yeah. People skip over that all of the time. And they think that achieving some internal product KPI that they have is success for the customer without translating it into their business context. And so I would say that would be my number 2. It's really important.
So again, we'll call that, I think, you add strategic value is the way that you described it this morning. But again, obviously you saw I've commented on this. To me, I feel like that one thing can unlock so much, because if you, and again, this goes back to your Lori, is that how you say the acronym?
Or
listen.
Laring, yeah.
Laring. It goes back to, if you're not constantly understanding what's happening, and the mindset that I when I talk to anybody is I say, look, assume that every conversation, everything has changed. If you go into every conversation assuming everything has changed, it foundationally changes the way that you set up that conversation from a curiosity, a discovery, and then it goes back to just understanding what the companies do. I really feel like most CS, a lot of CS people, if I said, great, what does this company do? They're like, they're in manufacturing. Well, okay, what do they actually do? I don't know. It's like, how can you help someone drive a business outcome if you don't know how they make money? And I say it to sales reps, it's the same thing. And I feel like we've got to treat CS the same way we do from a business acumen standpoint. I feel like a lot of times that CS to me, I think I put as like a third-class citizen. I feel like we treat sales here, SDRs because they're new business, and then CS. And this isn't every org, right? But I feel like there's a lot more love given to net new, let's put it that way. And I feel like, and that focus us to not over-index on training CS around business acumen, which is what I think you're getting at too. That I just feel like it's so critical. Like if sales should be able to read a annual report, then so should CS, right? Like they're going to be working with that customer for years. So
yeah. And unfortunately, I think it's true. Like there's a huge disparity in compensation for the two roles. Huge disparity in investment in internal tools and infrastructure to support the teams to do a good job.
That's right.
They overload a CSM with too many customers, so they literally don't have enough time to actually dedicate to gain that understanding of the customer's business. They think that their product or service is better than it is, and then the CSM is filling the gaps. Like there's so many reasons that this occurs. I feel like we continue to see mild improvement in the right direction, but it's going to take more time, I think, before it gets to where it needs to be.
This actually, I'm going to sidebar before we go for your third one. Tom Barker jumped in and asked a question early on. He said, because you just mentioned it, what do you think is a good account size for a mid-market AE? So the maximum accounts one should manage before hiring another one. Let's just set the table, because my answer would be like, it depends, and I'm sure yours is too. Let's say like average customer value is $40,000 a year, and growth on average could be up to like 20 to 30%. Like let's say it's an early stage company, they get you in the door with an initial 40 grand, they can grow ballpark, like any idea like what you would say is like the right number?
So it's a good question. I actually think about coming up with the right number differently than like.
Yeah, do it. Definitely.
Me. It really does depend. It could be as small as 5, it could be as high as 400, right?
That's right.
And so the lens with which I look at it is, what are we asking the CSM to do? What activities are we asking them to take on in order to drive the customer forward and make them successful, right? So it's defining your strategy and your customer success playbook and actually breaking down how much time are these activities going to take, and therefore how much time does every customer need dedicated to them on a weekly, monthly, quarterly basis. And then you can back into your number. And so that's how I've always approached what is the right number. You often have a feeling when I go into a new organization if it's too low or too high. And I actually I implement time studies where I have my team log their time for a week, and I aggregate team and individual ones so that I actually have clear data points on what they're spending their time with, and you can get to your answer that way. Now, if you get to that answer and the math doesn't make sense, like based on your, then that's a problem you have to solve. But I don't back into it based on the revenue. I actually am like, what do I want them to do? How long is it going to take them? And if they were working full time, how many customers could they manage, right?
Yeah, I think that's a really healthy way to do it, right? So you kind of look at it as like going forward, the activities we're asking, then you have to see, okay, what's the delta in the money I need to make, right?
Yeah.
Based on my original cost of sale and a few other things. To me, a lot of it depends on growth. But like how I would say, maybe the only thing I'd add is growth potential, meaning it's a much different capacity if you're in a time in your company's evolution where growth for that account is very high. It's like a land and expand type sale, right? Where you get in at an X and you grow. Then like the number's got to be a lot lower, right? It's like maybe it's 30 accounts or 20 accounts or like you said 10, whatever it is, because the growth is so big. And as you mature and it becomes more about retain, keep everyone happy, I think then you can up that to some extent, right? You still shouldn't go too crazy. Okay.
Last thing I would layer in quickly on this is segmentation. So you're going to have, your sort of smaller segment of customers, your larger segment of customers, and I'll often dedicate CSMs to different segments, and then the ratios can be different.
Right, exactly.
And that's all good too.
Would you put that in your third one? So you've got one more left. So you've got your third one. So
I got my third one. It's my last one that I mentioned, which is drive results. Like at the end of the day, you have to deliver on your promise to your customer. And if you don't, like they shouldn't be your customer anymore. And so results matter at the end of the day. And I loved when you brought up at the beginning, like happy versus loyal customer. Like I don't try and make customers happy. I try and make customers successful. I try and deliver what they expected to get from me when they decided to buy my product or my service. And at the end of the day, all of those other points are leading up to being able to do that effectively.
Yeah, I love that one. Yeah, and in your statement, it was they expect, not results that you expect. Yep. And I think that's the big gap I see for a lot, is that it's almost taking a one size fits all. They assume that that everybody who might be using the product is happy, which could be the case. But guess what? What if their business completely pivots to, and your product is an SMB product and they're trying to go enterprise, but everyone's still using it. If you're not asking those questions and being curious, that's when you get blindsided in the renewal process. Oh, I don't know what happened, Megan. They were happy. They told me they were using it, and like, it's because we're not having those tough conversations consistently. And I think that's a really good one. So all right. So you've got your top three. The link, again, Brian dropped the link into the post. Go check out the other post. It's great. Another question we had come in that I think is a perfect one is, renewal. Like, when you think about best process for generating a renewal, okay? So renewal biz, how do you ensure a salesperson, your clients, will renew? And this is a question from Brian. Do you have a process or method? I'll share mine after. But what are some of the, and again, you talked about tiering, and I'm sure that's involved. How do you think about building out a renewal engine, for customers?
Yeah, definitely. So my view is that your renewal starts at onboarding.
I love it.
So onboarding, poor onboarding is a leading cause of churn. And
totally. It failed to start. Yep. We've seen the same thing.
The most important thing that you can do to set yourself up for a good renewal is to have a really thoughtful and intentional onboarding process. And then I think there's a few things you have to make sure you cover there. So one is, regardless of what happened in the sales process and what the salesperson told you, you need to know as the CSM, what result does this client need from me in order to feel like they are getting their money's worth from the company, right? So it's clarifying that goal, clarifying that desired outcome. To your point, it's not how many times you log into my product. It's about something that matters to you. And so using the onboarding to clarify that. Don't assume. You can resurface the information you learned in the sales process and validate if that is still accurate. And something that I do and I make my teams do, which sometimes I feel like is overkill, every single meeting I have, I'm like, hey, these are your goals. Have they changed?
Yes,
no?
Exactly.
Great.
Yes.
Next week, here are your goals. Have they changed? No. Great. Next week.
Exactly.
Yes. Oh, they have? Tell me more.
That's it. That's why that mindset, right? Everything has changed. If you do that, the other thing I just want to add to the onboarding, what I found, another thing you can do in onboarding that a lot of people don't key in on is you can actually level up or get new people involved. from the very beginning. If you make things sound like typical, like, great, Megan. So typically your VP will sign off at this stage, somebody that your sales team never even had access to, right? I feel like the onboarding to me is one of the best ways to level up and to get new points of contact, because that's the other reason that we've seen is like usually a top 3 reason for churn. My main point of contact left,
Absolutely.
right? And you're single threaded in the account and you're screwed. So onboarding, I feel like there's so much goodness that you can extract out of that if you know what you're doing.
Yep. And so I was going to mention multi-threading. Like, I completely agree with that. You need to have multiple relationships. Often your person that you're working with day to day is not the decision maker. You need to identify the decision maker, other influencers in the org, and get on their radar so that they know who you are. I think the other piece for setting yourself up for a renewal is asking for feedback. And so I think customers do not like to give you bad feedback. They don't they are uncomfortable. They would rather say nice things. And so often if you're like, do you have any feedback for me? How are things going? 9 times out of 10, they're going to be like, everything's fine.
That's right. Yeah, it's fine.
If it is or not. And so people are not good at asking for constructive feedback. And so I like to be really explicit in all of my conversations with customers, and make it easy for them to do it. Hey, if there was one thing that I could do better for your account, what would that be? Are there other people in the organization that have an opinion on our product or service? And what is that opinion? Any interaction that happened that was less than ideal. Hey, let's unpack that interaction. How did it make you feel? Where could we have performed better? Like, not just asking how it's going, asking really specific questions to make it easy for them to tell you the bad thing that happened. Yeah. And so getting to that early and often is important. What's also super interesting is asking for positive feedback and seeing how people respond. So I'll say, hey, will you review me on G2? Or will you be a testimonial on our website? And when they're like, I don't know if I want to do that.
Send it over. Yeah.
Oh, what's going on? Why not? And that can uncover a lot of things. So you have to put effort into understanding where they're at, and you can't assume that everything's fine means everything is fine, right?
That's right.
And then lastly, I think, get ahead of the renewal. Like I'm like a 90-day in advance. You should be bringing it up. You should be bringing it up with your point of contact. You should be like, hey, this is coming up.
That's right.
Things going to happen. Do you anticipate any objections? Has anything changed? How can we work together to move this forward? And if you do onboarding correctly, get to the right people, and continue to ask for the right feedback and course correct as needed, that should be a fairly straightforward conversation, which is why I don't think you need account managers swooping in and saying, hey, it's been 8 months. Let's talk about your renewal.
Yeah. Random person who just hasn't been involved whatsoever. Oh God, I can't wait to talk to you. So excited. I don't know what this conversation's about. Just adding zero value throughout the process.
Exactly.
Yeah, I like that. I think, it's interesting. We call it we call it the 120-day renewal process, which is, I think, just starting it even sooner. That the goal whenever, our whole goal is that the renewal is done 30 days in advance, right? That by, it's almost like taking the 90-day, it's kind of taking the same 90-day window and just shifting it where, 4 months out, you're saying, great, let's set up some time to review what we've done before, understand objectives. Then, you go in to say, okay, great, here's an initial outline. Then you're kind of getting the final proposal done, hopefully, 30 plus days in advance whenever possible. The other thing I'd say that I think is really important is to always ask, it's very tactical, ask them when their budget season is. That a lot of times even salespeople don't do a good job of this, right? And so you got to understand, if you're a CS or account manager, if their budget year is January to December, like probably 50% of companies are, and your contract's up in May, you need to be having the conversation about the May contract in November. Like, the reason that you keep getting the same budget and not growing the account is you're off budget cycle. And so they can't go create budget. So that to me is a really tactical one that I feel like if more CS and account management individuals try to get the contract aligned to the budget cycle, I think you can get a lot bigger contracts. But if you keep getting that off budget, and you're not talking to them about it early on, then that's when I see this happen. So
yeah, I totally agree. It applies to upsells too. Like, don't ask, like, ask for the upsell at the right time, and or plant the seed so that it's proactively included in a future budget. Yeah,
that's right. Yeah, that's why we would, when I was at Glassdoor, the thing that we did that bucked a lot of trends, but worked out stupid well was everyone always says get annual contracts, right? Get annual contracts. So I'm like, well, it's April and their budget's there. Like, I don't want an annual contract. Like, I'm just going to sell a, whatever that is through the end of the year, a proof of concept, and then double dip in the same year. And I feel like too many companies were so laser focused. If you lock someone into an annual contract, you just eliminated their need to do anything. They're like, yeah, we can talk about it in April. And so that's just maybe more of a sales tactic, but you don't have to sell annual contracts. I know CEOs everywhere are cringing in VCs, but I'm telling you, we made a lot more money doing it this way. So, okay. So we were going to talk a little bit about account-based, right? And like what that means. But it's up to you, Megan. Like, how do you want to take it? Do you want to talk about account-based? Do you want to keep going deep on? I've got like another kind of like slew of questions around AMCS. What are you feeling today?
Let's grab a couple questions for those chiming in. I love answering questions.
All right. I've got another one. This is from Jeremy Burns. What's up, Jeremy? Hope you're doing great, man. So in the same vein, how do you prevent CS from pulling down LTV CAC? What's your opinion on outsourced CS teams? So there's a couple of questions in there. Let's first start with like maybe how you all do the equation. How do you think about equating, amount of money you can afford to invest versus what may be needed to, because the answer is always kind of like depends on what you can afford to spend. Like depends on what your VC is going to be pissed about or not. Like, but do you have like a typical ratio that you look for? It's cost to let's just call it like cost to service and grow an account year over year.
Yeah. So, I mean, I'm a fan of sort of the best practice around the like CAC to LTV ratios at 3-to-1 or something like that, with like the payback period. I think the problem though that happens is in almost every company, they're overspending on sales and under investing in CS, and all of it is part of the equation. And they're in this sort of growth at all costs mentality. And so those numbers, like the unit economics, are not healthy. But it's not because of the CS expense. It's because of they're typically, not spending marketing dollars properly. They're running 100% outbound engine, which is completely inefficient. They're thinking about marketing in completely the wrong way, and not doing demand generation effectively. And so I feel like, again, to your point of like CS being the third class citizen, it gets the blame. Then it's like, oh, well, let's just like bump up the ratios, reduce that team, not invest, and continue to like pour money in a trash can over here and think that that's the right thing to be doing. And so I think that's the root cause of the problem. I think obviously the math has to make sense. You have to have good margins. Like, it has to be a healthy business. It depends greatly based on the type of company that you have. But I think the common issue that comes up is that almost all of the time. And people don't solve for the root cause, but rather try and treat the symptoms. And ultimately, it usually doesn't work out.
Yeah. So it depends is the answer. Again, there's kind of a classic 3-to-1. But again, the key word in CAC is acquisition, right? And I think, do you have like maybe a target? Forget CAC. How about customer retention, like a CRC annually? Like, is there? I mean, whenever you ran teams and you ran a bunch of teams, was there a number that you all were forced to look at? Like it was 10% of the 10% of the book, 20%. Like, was there maybe a percent to book, that they were managing that you would target?
So yeah, I would always have retention and churn goals. I think for me, my belief is that your retention goal should always be over 100%. Some number of retain and grow, knowing you'll have churn, but that the upside will, overweigh the downside there. So typically, like my retention goals, actually fairly consistently probably were typically between like 100 and 110% of revenue. And I think churn is, you're always going to have churn. I like to split churn up into what I call preventable versus unpreventable. Sometimes company goes out of business or this and that. You just have to
act
put
of God is what we called it.
Exactly. You have to put those in a bucket, but managing that effectively in order to achieve that retention goal. And then it goes back to what I was saying before, like in order to retain a customer, you have to deliver outcomes, which means you have to invest a certain amount of time. And so like, I'll always go back to that. And then if for some reason the math doesn't make sense, like that's more problem solving that needs to happen. But the solution is almost never reduce the CS size of the CS team. Like the CS team carries typically 80 to 90% of the revenue in year for any SaaS company. Yet they are not, again, given the right investment. I think it's the overspending and the mismanagement on the customer acquisition side that I think continues. I don't know, I'm repeating myself, but it's what I believe.
Well, I talk about this, we have conversations around sales and marketing, which is if marketing is only aligned on MQLs or SQLs and that's how they're compensated, they're not going to give a shit about the sales process or current customers.
Yeah.
It's just the whole organization is focused on how many leads do we generate, not realizing, in my opinion, stupidly, that guess where it's easier to generate leads? Your current customers are cold people who've never heard of you. Like, guess what? The answer is your current customers. Okay. There's a cheat sheet for you. Okay. But I think too often, again, it's this over infatuation with net new. And it started with predictable revenue that said, if you just fill the top of the funnel, all SaaS problems are solved. Yep. And there's some truth in that, right? There's some that but I'm an investor in stage 2 capital and kind of the whole thesis of the fund is a retention. And it's actually kind of the opposite. It's like, let's invest in companies that are really good at keeping and growing customers, because those are the people that are going to have cohorts that continue to go like this versus people who just go hire 50 SDRs or, hundreds of that, or go spend X number on paid all the time. It's a combination of both. And I think more and more companies could probably get a lot out of paying, spending the same amount of effort, or at least some of that marketing effort around current account growth.
Absolutely.
As opposed to that. So let's talk about that. So that's I think that's a good transition. We've got a couple more questions, but let's talk a little bit about account growth and account-based selling and, kind of how that fits into this. So how do you see this kind of idea? And obviously, look, this is more for your mid-market account, right? Your large, small business, your mid-market, your enterprise and kind of that segment. How do you see CS playing into an account-based approach? And really, what are best practices that you've seen around creating a culture of growth? And then maybe I'm loading up this question. Creating a culture, because the reason that every time I was the head of sales, I had to run account management and customer success. Because then I control the buyer experience. I don't have to make short-sighted decisions at different stages because I know I've got to keep those accounts and deal with them. So I feel strongly that a sales leader needs to own the customer experience into it. That's just a belief that I have, and you have experts, but by doing that, when I would build CS and AM teams, I would have a growth mindset. You have a proactive mindset. So how do you think about kind of this idea of account-based selling, getting people to be more proactive versus kind of just just dealing with stuff as it comes in, which I think is a lot of these people, because they're understaffed or for whatever reason, feel like they can't have that mindset.
Yeah, absolutely. No, it's a common challenge for sure. One of the tactics that I use is the development of what I call a strategic account plan. There's a million templates online that you can find on that. But basically, for every single customer, you should know, have that solid understanding of their business, how they make money, why they decided to use your product, where they are in the process to get the results that they expect from using your product or service, who are the players in the game. What is your strategy to grow your relationships? What is your strategy to ensure that they get results? And then what is your strategy to identify how else we might be able to help them? The way I always frame it to my team, it's not what else can you sell them? It's how else can we help them drive new and better and different results? And if we have another part of our offering that can provide that to them, then that's a moment that we can educate and inform them about how we can continue to grow our relationship together, right? I believe very strongly, though, that you have to start proving some results. before you have an upsell conversation. You have to
you think that would be like, I think that's a good requirement, right? Like we're delivering on our original promise.
So many people skip over that though, right? It's 3 months in, they're still onboarding and they're like, hey, we have this other thing. Do you want to buy this other thing? It's like, whoa. I see it happen all the time, right? And so you got to get some wins on the board. You have to have a very strategic account plan that you're, refreshing on a regular basis. You need to be executing on that plan, which is about building better relationships, driving better results, continuing to gain a better understanding and get ingrained in the organization. And I view upsell or cross-sell or expansion or whatever you want to call it, I view that as problem solving. Like, hey, and if you actually become their trusted advisor and I say, I've had this with customers too, like, hey, I really think you should consider this because I know that so-and-so in your org cares about this. And I actually think this can help you.
Mm-hmm.
And I've always taken that approach and I typically always hit my revenue numbers, right? Like just don't shove things down people's throat. Like I don't want to sell something to a customer that isn't going to help them. And I've told that to customers like, ooh, this thing looks fun and shiny and new. Should I get this thing? And I'm like, you don't need that thing. And then once you tell that to a customer, they will trust you. They're on out. And then when you tell them, actually, yes, I think this other thing is the right next step for you, they'll believe you and they'll do it if it makes sense for them.
Yeah. How do you go about growing the relationship? Like just at the relationship level, like if we talk about account-based selling, right, which a lot of CS leaders or CS and AM leaders are being kind of asked to think about, right? I think a lot of times account-based selling, account-based marketing, we almost think of it purely top of the funnel, but in reality, most of it actually goes down after the first sale or second sale. In every enterprise org, there's going to be some type of proof of concept, some type of proof of scale before you get any type of like massive deal. And so when you work with account management groups in CS, how do you develop this? Like, again, you talked about like the account template, right? And like the account strategy template. I just shared a template in the comments, so feel free. You guys can click on that and I'll give you guys access to that. It's just a basic one that we use with our clients in our consulting. It's very basic. It'll help you to just like get a lot of those nuances. I think for a lot of people, you got to tier your accounts. And I think that a lot of it starts there. It's like a lot of CS would hear this and be like, oh my God, I can't do this, right? Whereas if you just say, I'm going to start with my top 10% or 20% of accounts, right, based on X criteria, then I think it becomes a lot more manageable, and doing that. So I've built my account template. What are some best practices you've seen in organizations really doing a good job of circling the account? What are some best practices around that?
It's interesting and something that I've discovered, like I'd say over the last couple of years that I think has been working really well for me is bringing your personality to the relationship. I think that in order to actually build an authentic relationship with someone, like you shouldn't treat them as your customer, like treat them as another person. And I see people feeling like they have to be super buttoned up, super professional, not necessarily themselves. They're going through the motions. They're saying the talking points. And honestly, the best customer relationships I have are when I'm like taking a sip out of my Iron Man cup and they're like, Iron Man, do you like Iron Man? And we're joking about Marvel for a minute, a prospect hasn't responded to my email and I send him a note like, did I scare you off with that price? Like, what's on your mind? Like, let me know. Like, just being who you are, even if it's a little quirky, that's actually how you build authentic connection. And then when you have those tough feedback conversations or this and that,
that's right,
talking to you. And so it's a basic thing, but I don't see a lot of people feel like they have to be appropriate or be a certain way. And I find that more and more, if you can be more human in B2B, people gravitate towards that. They like it. I think another key approach is you have to know what the business cares about. And COVID was a super interesting situation for businesses, right? Like almost every business was impacted in some way, some positively, some negatively, maybe some not so much, but many people made pivots. Things are changing all of the time. And so I think getting really, aligned with your customer on how things are evolving and how priorities are shifting and changing is really critical. Because I think we touched on this a little bit earlier, but people assume that some of the initial assumptions at the beginning of the relationship just remain to be true as you move forward and are not continuing to be curious and ask questions. And those are the type of things that can either cause a churn and or create an opportunity for an upsell, right? As those things are evolving and changing. So those are just a couple of like very specific tactics that come to mind.
What about I think a classic one is, I think, I love the point about, again, like, I think hopefully everyone has had this as a takeaway now, right? That it's always about re-engineering, and now it's re-engineering, bi-weekly, monthly because of COVID. And also just not making the assumption that everything's bad. Like, that's the other thing, is I see a lot of CS reps like being overly sympathetic. We're like, oh, I don't want to have this. It's like, well, a lot of industries are doing really good right now. So don't just assume that it's bad. Just like assume that it's, it is what it is. Let the customer tell you. So I would say probably one of the most frequent questions I'll get around this topic: Megan, I'm stuck with Louise. Louise is the director of operations. She's the point of contact. I don't want to get my hand slapped, right? So what are some best practices? You talked about being relatable. That's step one. Do I trust this person? So then when I introduce them to somebody else, I don't worry that this, Johnny's going to go try to sell the shit out of him, right? Yeah. So you got to build trust with your main, but I'm sure you've all been there, right? Where you've got a point of contact and they suck. They suck, right? Like they're just a blocker. They're not seeing the strategic value. Like, what are some tips? And I know a lot of my salespeople are thinking this on the pre-sales and CS on the other, like, yes, right? Like, what are some of the best ways you've seen with, because again, we don't want to go around, or maybe we need to, and maybe we can talk about that. What about how you can try to get them in their corner, but there becomes a point where it's like, this person is just not seeing it. So how do you handle those types of accounts?
Yeah, my go-to first step is, can I figure out what this person cares about on a personal level and not the company or the business level? And can I help them in a personal way? If I can do that, you can often get over that hump. Not always possible though. So if it's really someone, they suck, they're not great, my one trick doesn't work. One thing that I try a couple of tactics. So one is, hey person, I really want to get, these other people in your org on a call to discuss things. And things have been going great. So good news, it can really be an opportunity for you to showcase your good work. So can I make my person look great in front of other people in the company? And is that enough motivation for them to make that meeting happen? Another thing that I'll say is, hey, very typical in our process is, at this point in our engagement, we always send out a survey to these types of people within our company, customers, organizations. And so I just wanted to give you the heads up that, these folks in your organization are going to receive an email from me to take a, 3-minute survey. I'll share the results with you and we can unpack them together. But basically kind of like make it an assumed part of the process that this is something we do with everyone. It's standard practice. It allows us to get a pulse on how things are going. Very rarely will they be like, no, don't send that, right? They're like, okay, that's fine. Mm-hmm. They don't always answer those surveys, but it's the entry point to reach out. Often if you don't have their contact information or you're not sure who those people are, you can use that conversation to find out that information. And then, actually send them a survey, request a feedback call, continue to try and engage those people independently, but you're not going around your person, right? Like they know what you're doing. So they're not going to be caught off guard of like, Megan reached out to me. Do you know who Megan is? Like, what's going on? Like, oh, they let me know it's a survey, blah, blah, blah. So those are a couple tactics that I've used.
This idea of a survey. Step one is just straight up asking, it sounds like, right? So it's like, hey, look, typically, and again, like the words that matter, when you make things sound typical, this is just like a small tweak. If you'd say, I'd love to loop in so-and-so, you got to make it sound normal. So typically at this stage, we'll loop in these people. So that I just want to kind of call that out. So what I hear a lot of CS people, again, they don't rock the boat. Oh, I'd love to blah, blah, blah. And then they wonder why they get shut down. And it's such a small, dumb reason that they could get over. Okay, so what happens when that doesn't go down, Megan? So I try to do this. I said at the meeting, like, no. Got to go through me. And then I try to send out a survey or I try something else. Like, no. I am Bonnie. I am the keeper of all the keys and gates, which I think it happens frequently. Yep. So how do you judge the risk reward, right? I think that's probably what everyone's trying to figure out. How do I judge the risk reward of going over here and maybe blowing this thing up? Or, is finding a way to kind of like massage or work it. How do you look at that? Like, judging that, when is it time? When do you need to do it? Or maybe your view is, Jake, you never need to do it. And I'd love to hear more on that too. But how do you handle those situations? So let's say they're combative and they're like, no, things are going well, but they're just worried about the pitch. They're worried about the sales pitch. So how do you know when enough is enough, and maybe some delicate ways to just around?
Yeah, for sure. So whenever there's a situation like this, my view is that the account is at risk. If your point of contact is really like adamant about not having you talk with anyone else in the company, that's a red flag. And so once an account is at risk, in my opinion, there's already a good chance that you're going to lose that customer at some point in time. And so if all of the things that I've just described, don't work, it's funny, like pre-coronavirus, I would show up to customers' offices unannounced. Did that all the time, especially managed by Q when I had an excuse to be in the space. I often will message people on LinkedIn directly, like, oh, I notice you're so-and-so at this company where I'm working with so-and-so, just wanted to introduce myself. I'm a part of like lots of different networking groups like Revenue Collective or Rev Genius or this and that. And so, I might actually be connected to either the person I want or someone else.
Right.
And so can I leverage a personal connection to get to that person, and or other tactics I used to do. And this is also really hard right now because everyone's at home and it's like weird to ask for people's home addresses, but like sending a note, like I would send a note or send something to the office that would just get someone's attention. Right. And so that's a little difficult to implement right now because you're like, can I have your home address? And they're like, no. But that worked well sort of back when we were all in an office.
Yeah, I like that. that. And I think LinkedIn sales now can be a great way. If what I would suggest doing is as soon as you get assigned a new account, connect with everybody. Like if I were in CS now, I got, we just closed a big deal. I would connect with everybody up front who I think, and then I can always just send them a message too. Like, hey, we're looking forward to kicking off with your team or, whatever it is afterwards. And then again, if you're producing content that's relevant, then you'll kind of have like a nurture stream to those people outside of just, hey, what's going on? Have you ever just straight went over someone's head? Have you ever just straight, you've got a director, a manager, have you ever just went over someone's head and said, look, we want to be successful. I'm not sure if we can be successful. Like, have you ever had to have it come to that?
So whenever I've done it, I've always told my point of contact what I'm doing. But sometimes, yes, like they maybe really don't want me to. And I'm like, I have to take this step. But I never do it without them not knowing. Yeah. And if the conversation has gotten till that point, typically I've already said, I'm sensing that something is off here. What's on your mind? What's going on? What is your hesitancy in introducing me to this person? Like this goes back into having like the tough conversations. And I think also, none of these tactics that I'm saying are like, they're all simple and basic and straightforward. And I think that people often think there's a fancy, sophisticated way to do something. It's like, just ask plainly, just call out the elephant in the room. Be like, whoa, what's going on? Like, okay, if I'm not getting what I need from you, I'm going to have to reach out to so-and-so. I'm getting the sense that you're not thrilled about that, but it's important to me that I know where I stand here and we've reached an impasse, right?
Yeah.
And it's difficult to have those tough conversations with customers, but it's part of it's a relationship. Relationships are hard. Relationships have conflict. Relationships have awkward moments. You have to navigate them and you have to be confident to do so. Yeah.
Yeah. I think that's it. There comes a point where, the risk reward, you have to just be willing to say, bite the bullet. And if someone is completely unreasonable, what do you have to lose? The other thing is, can you bring in a third party? Can you bring in a boss? Can you bring in, or somebody from a different department? I've had success in the past where, again, it goes to, if during onboarding these other things, you can build some other relationships, right? Then sometimes you can go to those other people. But if you stay single-threaded and you don't do that, you're setting yourself up for failure, right? It's the reason that this keeps happening is you don't put in that work up front to establish a few other relationships. Let's say you're doing a training for a new team. Well, get to know that sales manager, that whatever manager. You get I feel like there's a lot of opportunities for relationships that if you have in your mindset that your job is to train people to make them use it, you'll forget to do this other stuff.
Yep.
You know, as a big chunk of it. So Megan, where should people get at you? We're out of time now. I could keep talking about this shit for forever. Where should people find you? Let me do a plug for Megan real quick too. So Refine Labs, the company she's now COO of, I'm just going to say you're running it basically because I know Chris and I know it's really happening. I'm kidding. Chris is awesome. Chris and I catch up every other week just talking, running small companies and growing companies. But if you are looking for a performance marketing organization, B2B company, I really highly suggest you hit up Refine Labs. And what Megan and Chris and the team, what I appreciate about them is they are focused on performance, but what they're really focused on are business outcomes. And I think, and Megan, I don't want to put words in your mouth. And if my pitch sucks, then you can redo it. But what I like is that the conversations I have with Chris is about driving revenue and driving business results, as opposed to focusing on what I think a lot of, again, going back to that MQL. Like at the end of the day, we're trying to drive revenue, correct? Yes, correct. Yes. Amazing. Like then let's focus our performance marketing efforts on driving revenue. And I feel like that's one thing that you all really focus on that I just don't see in the market. So that's my plug. If you need a performance marketing agency, I want you to hit up Megan right now. I dropped her LinkedIn profile in there. Megan, where else can people get at you?
I'm really only on LinkedIn. I don't do any other social media actually. So that's the best place to find me. And I try to post regularly on customer success and operations and sales and personal development and leadership. So I love lots of different topics. And your pitch was right. I would say the one clarifying thing on Refine Labs, like we're buyer-centric, revenue-focused, and we do performance marketing, but we have a lot of really unique strategies for demand generation that other companies are just not doing, and that's how we're confidently able to say that we can deliver results. And so, the reason I joined Refine Labs is because I'm a big believer in not doing things the way they've always been done. And, we practice what we preach. 100% of our customers come to us inbound because of our demand generation strategies, and we can help other companies do the same.
Love it. Awesome. Well, Megan, good catching up as always. Because I feel like we can kind of we should set some time. We'll catch up. But I feel like in these, we kind of catch up anyway, right? It's like, oh, hey, what's going on? What's new? So it makes life a little easier. So, all right, everyone, thank you so much for tuning in. I really appreciate it. Make sure this Friday, the recap, you can join at 8:30 Central, 9:30 Eastern. I don't know what music choice we're going to pick. I've been doing a lot more music, adding it to these, Megan. I feel like it adds an element of fun to it, where I feel like LinkedIn can be so boring. And so we did 90s R&B. We did top 40 last, and then we did we did No Limit. We did a tribute to No Limit. Master P, C Murder. It was going down on BET, so I had to represent it. So, all right. So check it out, everyone. Every Friday on LinkedIn, live, 9:30 Eastern AM. We'll see you there, Megan. Thank you again so much. I really appreciate it.
Take care, everyone.
All right. Later.